Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So on the lineup building for week 19 of the NFL season over on DraftKings, the first round of the NFL playoffs. And we have several slates this weekend. I am mainly focusing on the 6-game slate. I realize I don't think it's the main one. I think we have the Saturday, then we have the Sunday separately, then we have the Monday showdown, I believe. So there are several ways you can go. I'm going to cover the 6-game slate because that just goes over every single game, and a lot of things I say can apply to other slates depending on what you're playing. But we're going to focus on the 6-gamer, go over cash game and GPP strategy. But if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, just leave it a like and subscribe. I do appreciate that very much. And if you want to take that one step further and become an official member over on Patreon, link is down below in the description for that. Cheat sheets, spreadsheets, optimizers, ownership projections, all that fun stuff, not just for the NFL, but the NBA each and every single night, which I do update throughout the day, as I think we all know how crazy NBA is. We have NASCAR starting next month and baseball in a few. So there's a lot to be excited about coming up. I know the football season is winding down, but it is nice to have some other things to look forward to. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm sure most of you know what it is by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified. Just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests or salary cap restrictions or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, when you sign up on PrizePicks, you can get a free money bonus as an instant deposit match up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. But I think it'll be up for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, my little disclaimer before we get started. The purpose of this video is not for me to give you guys a lineup to copy and paste into all of your contests. You have to be able to think for yourselves and build your own lineups. I'm just simply going through a cash game process with the information that we have right now, because there's no guarantee that I end up using whatever lineup I build here. I'm just simply going through a cash game process that I use each and every single week. And I did go 14-3 in cash this year, so I feel like it's a pretty good process. And you can apply that to your own favorite plays this weekend and build your own lineups. Plus, things are going to change by the time kickoff rolls around. And I base things off my optimizer, ownership projections, and things like that. So I think you guys get the gist here. So if we're kind of gearing towards a cash game build in this specific lineup, I will talk about tournaments too, which I'm probably going to play some tournaments this weekend. I usually do play single enter GPP, but just starting my cash lineup. But this is a pretty fun week to build multiple tournament lineups because we have a lot of good plays, which makes sense because it's the playoffs, so all the best players for the most part are available to us. And lots of good quarterbacks that you can see. We have Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, Stafford, Jalen Hurts, and it kind of falls off a cliff after that. But lots of good quarterbacks, which means we have lots of good pass catching options and lots of good stacks. And all the totals are right around 50 points this week. So I am pretty excited for it. You can make some really fun looking lines. But if we're kind of gearing towards more of a cash game build just for this, I typically like to start with the running back position because these are the guys that are going to touch the ball the most. I don't want to make any sacrifices here. I'll make sacrifices for like a wide receiver 3 or tight end or whatever. Sometimes I don't really care who shows up there as long as they're on the field and get some assortment of targets. But the running backs, I don't want any backups. I want guys that are going to get around 20-some touches, are in good game environment, good game script, all those things. So I start with running backs, and then I move on to other positions. And looking at the landscape of running back this week, they're all fairly priced, I would say, which is good because if we gander over to the wide receiver position, loads of good plays. Pretty much every single good wide receiver in football besides like Devontae Adams. Like we are absolutely loaded. Kupp, Samuel, Chase, Diggs, Hill, Evans, the list goes on. So I'm liking that we can save a little bit of money at the running back position no matter who we use. So kind of going over my cash game pool of running backs, Joe Mixon at the very top, obviously the top option there, projections love him. And after that, we kind of have a red sea of injuries. It looks like any given DFS slate where there's just guys questionable on the IR, although some of these guys in the IR are eligible to return. We'll have to get some official news on that. The main guy I'm talking about, Leonard Fournette, $5,900. We're just going down the cash game list. So we already mentioned Joe Mixon. And really after that, all these guys are okay, but I don't really love them in cash. I mean, James Conner maybe if Chase Edmonds happened to miss, but I'm assuming he's going to be good to go. But Leonard Fournette, if he happens to play, $5,900 facing Philly, a team that has not been very good versus running backs this year, especially pass-catching running backs. And if you're looking at Fournette's targets, I realize Giovanni Bernard is also eligible to return, but Fournette's going to be the main guy in this offense, and his usage was absolutely fantastic. Just looking at the past month, 6, 8, 8, 7 targets, didn't even play a full game versus New Orleans. He gets double-digit carries most games. He's the goal line back. He's always a threat to score. I love Leonard Fournette in all formats, assuming he is back and good to go. He's not going to see any limitations. If Giovanni Bernard happens to play as well, could hurt him a bit in the passing game, but Fournette's still going to get ample usage, and he's just too cheap in a good matchup versus Philly as nearly double-digit favorites at home. So he's in a smash spot if he happens to return. I also like Eli Mitchell a lot, only $5,500 for a guy that can get 20-plus carries any single week. And after that, I mean, that's kind of like the core three of cash running backs for me on this slate. That's who's popping out the most in my projections. There's a couple other guys you can think about. Ezekiel Elliott, Josh Jacobs, James Conner, Najee Harris. They're fine. They just don't project quite as well for me. So the first guy we'll plug in is Joe Mixon. Everyone loves the Cincy passing attack, but everyone's going to like Joe Mixon as well. I think everyone just likes Cincy in general. They get a good matchup versus the Raiders. The Raiders are not very good versus fantasy running backs. And Joe Mixon on a good offense. Home favorite, high implied team total. I want to say it's around 28 points. And he's using the passing game. In the past 2 weeks, he played 6 and 8 targets, 18 and 12 carries, and he's going to get you probably around 20, 25 total opportunities. I'll take that all day. Below 7K also has pretty high touchdown equity as well. So we're going to plug in Joe Mixon and feel pretty good about that in cash games. The second guy we're going to plug in, we're just making the assumption that he is going to be back from the IR, but we already talked about him. But it's hard not to like Fournette in a similar situation to Joe Mixon where he just gets a ton of usage on a good offense, high implied team total, playing at home. They're a favorite. This makes a lot of sense to me. So just make an assumption that he plays. If he doesn't play, obviously you can't play him. You have to make some other decisions at running back, but those are the two guys that are popping the most for me. And just to fill out the flex, because I typically am one to go 3 running backs in cash games, I'm just going to plug in Eli Mitchell, just soak up those 20-plus touches at $5,500. Yes, I realize the matchup versus Dallas isn't pretty. I mean, they're a great defense in general. But fantasy points allowed per game to running back position, I wouldn't say they've been elite so far this year. And just looking at the opportunity for Eli Mitchell, past 5 games, 27, 27, 22, 21, and 21 carries. I realize he isn't a big proponent in the passing game. They had that one game with 6 targets. But if he's going to give me that kind of work on the ground, get close to 100 yards, and hopefully fall into the end zone, I'll take that all day, $5,500. The 49ers are dogs here on the road in Dallas, but it's only a 3-point spread, so I don't think it's going to be a blowout or anything. So they should be able to establish the run with Eli Mitchell. And I feel really good about that start at the running back position. Mixon, Fournette, Eli Mitchell, all these guys can see 20-plus touches, and they're really not that expensive. So at this point, we can either move on to quarterback or look at our wide receivers. I'm going to be honest, there is so many good wide receiver plays on this slate that I honestly feel like maybe just leaving them close to the end, really, just because I am fine with any of these options like Kupp, Samuel, Chase, Diggs. It really just comes down to, in tournaments, it really comes down to what stacks you're rolling with or whatever quarterback you're using. In cash games, that won't matter as much. But since the wide receiver position is so open to me, I'm going to plug in my cash game QB. And, I mean, honestly, all these guys are playable. Josh Allen's the one guy I don't love. I mean, the weather in Buffalo is not going to be pretty. New England, they're going to slow that game down and probably run quite a bit. So I don't think the Bills are going to do like a ton of damage on offense. I still think they win, but it might be kind of an ugly game for DFS purposes. But we have many other good options. But for me in cash games, Jalen Hurts is the guy I've been landing on because it's in a prime spot for wanting to use Jalen Hurts. Because when does he play his best fantasy football, I should say? It's when he's trailing and he can just kind of rack up some points in garbage time. And they're nearly double-digit and they're like 8 or 9 point dogs on the road in Tampa, who is currently a bottom 10 team in fantasy points allowed per game to the quarterback position. So I think Hurts is in a prime spot here. Obviously, he can use his legs to get there. If he just has a decent day through the air, like 200-some passing yards, maybe 1 to 2 touchdowns, maybe a rushing touchdown, he should have a fine day. I have a hard time seeing a bust at this price. Only $6,100 just seems so cheap. And his pass catching options are pretty cheap too with Dallas Goedert and Devonta Smith. And you can always run it back with a guy like Gronk, Leonard Fournette, or Mike Evans, or if you want to go with Grayson or a guy like that, you can. But $6,100 is too cheap, and I think he's probably our best option for cash this weekend in tournaments. I love Joe Burrow, obviously. I like Tom Brady. I like Prescott. I like Stafford. I like Mahomes. I mean, all these guys are good plays, but in cash, Hurts has been the guy I'm landing on the most. And like I said, wide receiver is pretty open to me. I'm going to plug in the popular defense. I assume on this slate it's going to be the Chiefs here versus Pittsburgh. 12.5 point favorites. They're playing at home. Pittsburgh is, in my opinion, the worst team in the playoffs. I mean, I guess the Eagles are pretty bottom of the barrel as well, but I would say the Steelers are probably the worst team. And Chiefs defense has been playing pretty well recently. I'm just going to plug them in $3,300. And Big Ben's always good for some turnovers and sacks, so I do feel pretty good about the Chiefs' defense. Obviously, if you wanted some extra correlation, you could get one of the running backs' defenses in here, so like Tampa Bay or Cincy's defense, but I'm kind of hoping some of these games turn into shootouts, and the Chiefs I don't really care about too much because I'm not stacking them in this lineup, although I don't think it makes a difference either way. So at this point, we have around $5,600 left. We have 3 wide receivers and a tight end. And really, I think there's 2 ways to go and cash at tight end on this slate. I think you either play Rob Gronkowski, facing the Eagles, who are giving up the second most points per game, the tight end position this year. Past 2 weeks, no Antonio Brown or Chris Godwin. He has 20 targets, 14 catches, over 100 yards in both contests. Hasn't had a touchdown in a long time, but I guess that just means he's due. But I like Gronk a lot. I would not be surprised if we see a similar performance that he had in week 17 and 18, and maybe we get lucky with a touchdown as well. So if you have the money for Gronk, absolutely love him. If you do not have the money for Gronk, now obviously if you want to pair with Jalen Hurts, you can use Dallas Goedert. I have no problem with that. But CJ Uzomah is a good way to get cheap exposure to the Bengals pass offense without really breaking the bank. I mean, looking at his game log recently, I'm not one to really just game log watch, but the targets are there since week 13, 6, 6, 4, 7, 6. I know he's not doing a ton with it, but he's getting points every single weekend. We know he's capable of those big blow-up games. But we've seen it before. We saw it earlier in the season versus Baltimore. We had 2 touchdowns, nearly 100 yards on 3 catches, and around 25 DraftKings points. Week 4 versus Jacksonville, nearly 100 yards on 6 targets, and close to 27 DraftKings points. The upside's there. I think the floor is decent. Only $3,200. He's about half the price as Kelsey and Rob Gronkowski. Now, he doesn't have the ceiling as often as they do. But just to get cheap exposure to that Bengals offense that I think is going to put up some points here versus the Raiders, I don't mind that. Now we're left with just over $6,000 left for 3 wide receiver spots, which gives me some added flexibility because if you happen to go the Rob Gronkowski route, we're left with just over $5,000. And if you go with Travis Kelce, not much of a difference there, but probably right at, oops, didn't mean to put Cup in there. Yeah, just a little bit under that. So, I mean, you could obviously go 2 separate ways, but I'm not loving the value wide receivers in this slate. And if I had to go cheap at any position, I'd prefer it to be tight end. So we're going to plug in Uzomah for right now. We have 3 wide receiver spots open, and just try to keep in mind we have just under $20,000 for 3 guys. I think Cooper Kupp's a fantastic play, and he plays on Monday night. So if you're playing the 6-game slate and you have a nice sizable lead in your contest, be careful because you have the Cooper Kupp hammers coming for you, and he can obviously put up like 40 DraftKings points, and I don't think anyone would be super surprised about that. So if you want to play Kupp, by all means go for it. If we happen to go the Kupp route, we're left with just over $5,000 left, which means you're going to have to dig down a little bit if you wanted to go like Christian Kirk just to kind of correlate that and get 2 guys from that game, just kind of running it back. Then you have $4,100 left. You could use like a Chase Claypool, Van Jefferson, AJ Green. I have no problem with that, but if you want to go more balanced, I have no Kansas City Chiefs. I like to get some exposure to it, so maybe I try to throw in a Tyreek Hill who's been very up or down this season, but that price is very nice. If you wanted to get a Jamar Chase in, he's $6,400. You could go that route, and you have $4,700 left. Once again, Van Jefferson, you have a Gabriel Davis, you have a Jacoby Myers. Not the most exciting options out there, but they're definitely, I think, somewhat playable. If you wanted to correlate your lineup with Jalen Hurts, we could get the Devontae Smith in there, who is only $5,500. And this is a fantastic game script for the Eagles' passing attack. You throw in Mike Evans for the run back option. You're left with $6,100 left. You can get a Deontay Johnson, T. Higgins, CeeDee Lamb. Just many ways you can go on this slate. I love Jamar Chase if you happen to go Jamar Chase. I realize we have 3 Bengals, but again, it's a 6-game slate, so you can break some of the rules. For $6,000, you have a lot of Bengals. Maybe you want to run it back with a guy like Hunter Renfrow, and then you have just enough money for Devonta Smith once again. Or if you want to differentiate from that, you can certainly go that route as well. But there's a lot of good plays in the slate, and I'm very excited for it. I think you make some really interesting looking lineups, whether you're playing cash games or tournaments. But with that being said, I think that'll be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become an official member over on Patreon. You know where to find it. Link can be found down below. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by PrizePicks, just you versus the projections. And as of right now, if you sign over there, you can get a free money bonus and deposit match up to $100. So it's free money. Why not use it to your advantage when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. That'll be it. I'll get out of here. Wish you guys the best of luck, and I'll see you tomorrow for the Core Plays video.